Hello, and thank you so much for joining us again. Today, we're talking about two books. Just two. But these two books had some incredibly radical ideas for how the world should work. And together, well, they didn't just inspire a little bit of change. They literally drew the battle lines for the entire modern age. All right, let's just jump right in. I want you to imagine a book, a single book, so powerful that it becomes the actual operating manual for a revolution. That's exactly what Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract was. We're not talking about some dusty old theory here. This was the intellectual ammunition, the ideological weapon that helped tear down an entire monarchy and build a republic from the ground up. So how does that even happen? How can one book become a weapon for revolution? And how did another book, written just a few decades later, create its greatest rival? That is exactly what we are breaking down today. You could say we're looking at the source code for the two competing political systems that completely define the 20th century and, still shape our world. Democracy versus communism. One book gave us the blueprint for freedom through self-government. The other, a manifesto for liberation through class warfare. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the blueprint for democracy, Rousseau's answer to tyranny. We need to set this stage here. Picture the 18th century. What's the dominant political system? It's absolute monarchy, right? You've got kings ruling by what they called divine right. This meant their power came straight from God, not from the people they were governing. You weren't a citizen in the way we think of it, you were a subject. And Rousseau, he looked at this whole setup and asked a really dangerous question. Is any of this actually legitimate? And his answer was a concept so revolutionary it shook the world: the general will. Now, this is important. This is not just what the majority of people want, like in an opinion poll. No. It's a much deeper idea. It's the idea that a society, as a collective, has a shared interest in its own common good. And that, Rousseau argued, that collective will is the only legitimate source of power. Not a king, not a divine right from God, but the unified will of the people themselves. Just think about how radical that was for the time. So the next question is, how do you actually make this general will happen? Well, you do it through a social contract. And what's so fascinating here is the bargain at the heart of it. Here's the deal. You agree to give up your sort of unlimited, chaotic natural liberty, the freedom of the jungle, where the strongest person just takes what they want. But in exchange, you get something way more valuable: civic liberty. That's freedom under laws that we all collectively create for ourselves as equals. And this right here is the absolute knockout punch. The idea that turned the whole world upside down. If the people are the source of that general will, then sovereignty, the ultimate final right to rule, can only belong to the people. Period. It's not the king's anymore. With that one single idea, Rousseau basically handed the world the philosophical justification to dethrone kings and build the very foundations of modern democracy. All right, now let's fast forward a bit into our next section, the Manifesto for Revolution. This is Marx's answer to capitalism. Because you see, less than a century after Rousseau, a completely new kind of power was taking over Europe: the Industrial Revolution. It didn't just build factories and create steam engines. It had created a whole new kind of tyranny. This one wasn't based on royal bloodlines, but on cold, hard capital. So you have Karl Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels. They're looking at this new industrial world, and they see society splitting right down the middle into two great hostile camps. On one side, you've got the bourgeoisie. These are the owners. They own the factories, the machines, the capital, basically the means of production. And on the other side, you've got the proletariat, the industrial working class, the massive group of people who have nothing to sell but their own labor just to survive. And for Marx, this wasn't just some unfortunate side effect of progress. Oh no, this was the engine that drove all of human history. He argued that the state, the government, it wasn't some neutral referee born out of a noble social contract like Rousseau imagined. It was a weapon, an executive committee, he called it, for the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, designed for one purpose: to protect their property and keep the working class oppressed. So what's their solution? It's not a new contract. It's not a better, more representative government. It's total, all-out revolution. A violent overthrow of the entire ruling class and the system that supports it. The goal wasn't to tweak the state or reform it. The goal was to smash it, seize all the means of production, and get rid of the very idea of private property that, in their view, created this whole class system to begin with. So now we have these two incredibly powerful critiques of the world as it was. Both of them wanted to tear down the old power structures,
But, and this is a huge but, they offered fundamentally different blueprints for the society that would come after. It's a real tale of two revolutions.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? It perfectly illustrates the fundamental split. For Rousseau, the core problem was the tyranny of the monarchy. His solution? A social compact that creates a state governed by the people's general will. For Marx, the core problem was economic exploitation by the bourgeoisie. His solution? A proletarian revolution to ultimately create a classless and eventually stateless society. One guy wanted to perfect government, the other wanted to make it totally obsolete. So, let's talk about why all this history we've inherited still matters so much today. Because these are not just dusty old books sitting on a shelf somewhere. Not at all. You could think of them as active, living documents. Their ideas are literally woven into the fabric of our world, from the way our governments are set up to the huge ideological conflicts that have defined and continue to define our times. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's like a series of dominoes falling. In 1762, Rousseau publishes The Social Contract. A few decades later, bam, the French Revolution erupts. Then, in 1848, Marx and Engels publish the Communist Manifesto. A few generations after that, bam, the Russian Revolution establishes the first communist state. By 1945, the entire planet is locked in the Cold War, this titanic ideological struggle, pitting these two worldviews directly against each other. It's a direct line from the page to the battlefield. But here's a really fascinating twist in all of this. Despite their profound differences, and they are profound, these two rival ideologies actually started out by attacking the very same enemy. Absolute monarchy. They had a shared enemy. Rousseau's general will provided the theory to reject the divine right of kings in France, and Marx's proletarian revolution fueled the overthrow of the Russian Tsarist Empire. So they were both incredibly powerful tools for dismantling that old world of kings and emperors, even if they had completely different ideas about what to build in its place. There's that famous saying, right? History that is not remembered will surely be repeated. And that really gets to the heart of why we need to understand these origins. The debates we are having right now about the right balance between individual liberty and the collective good, about economic inequality, about what the role of government should even be, all of these arguments echoed the very same questions first laid out in these two texts. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. In a world that is still very much shaped by this tension between individual liberty and the collective good, which ideas from these revolutionary texts do you think resonate most today? It's something to chew on. The questions these books raise are definitely still with us, and their answers continue to shape our world, whether we realize it or not. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time with another insightful classic. See you then.